Hey guys, so this is a review of skills that we're going to need for our next upcoming unit, and it's all about simplifying polynomial expressions. Polynomial expressions are anything with a bunch of x's and y's, and they're added, subtracted, and multiplied together. So the first step we have to talk about is when they are added and subtracted together. So when we look at this, all this is a fancy way of combining like terms. So in this case, we can ignore the parentheses because we're adding. So we're just going to add 4a and 3a to get 7a, and then a negative 5 or a minus 5 plus 6 is going to be a plus 1. The big thing comes in when we're dealing with a whole bunch of other numbers. Again, it's a plus, so I'm just going to ignore the parentheses. And when I'm dealing with an xy, that means that I have to combine it with another xy. So these are going to be like terms. 10xy. Now I look and I go, okay, plus 2y. Well, this has a y, but it also has an x there, so it's not a like term. So there's no other just y's, so plus 2y. And then this plus 6x minus x is going to turn into plus 5x. And the same goes with exponents. So the p squareds and the p's don't go together. So for 5, again, it's a plus. 3p squared plus another p squared, that's 4p squared. Minus 2p minus 7p minus 9p plus 3 plus 7 is plus 10. Now you notice in all of these, I am just adding these together. Oftentimes we see this mistake of subtracting it and that sort of thing because you're so used to seeing an equal sign. If you don't see an equal sign, or if all the variables are on one side of that equal sign, all you're doing is combining them. So you're adding them together or subtracting them, whatever operation you see. But you don't change it to the opposite. You only change it to the opposite if you see an equal sign and there's like a 2x over here and a 3x over here, where they're like terms, but they're on opposite sides of an equal sign. That is the only time where you would subtract from both sides. Here, there is no equal sign, so we just do the operation as we see. If this equal sign was a plus and it equals 4, well, now I can ignore this. All I'm going to do is add these together because they're on the same side. And that's all we're doing here, is these are all on the same side, so we're just combining. The next ones, 7 and 9, are minus. Okay, so you have to recognize is this minus doesn't just go for this first part. It goes for this whole second parenthesis. It doesn't go to the first part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this, but I'm going to distribute the negative or the minus through. So all that does is it changes all the signs here. So this minus minus becomes a plus 6p squared minus 6r plus 3. Most common mistake is not to make that minus go through all of them. So it changes the signs. So now I can combine my like terms. Again, I only have one p squared term, okay? A term meaning the whole thing, okay? So it's going to end up being 6p squared. I'm going to combine my r's and, there's no other p's, so I'm just going to put plus 8p. Minus 5r minus 6r is a total of minus 11r plus 3. And the same would go here, okay? So again, the first parenthesis doesn't get changed. 3x squared minus 2x. The second parenthesis changes all the signs. So now it becomes a minus 3x squared minus a 5x plus a 1. Now when I combine my like terms, 3x squared minus 3x squared is 0. 3 minus 3 is 0. So that term just goes away. They cancel out. Then I do minus 2x minus 5x, that's minus 7x, or negative 7x, plus 1. And you notice that I'm using minus and negative as the same thing. They are, okay? So you have to recognize that a subtraction and a minus sign and a negative sign are the same thing. They're just written differently, okay? And they're read differently. So in this case, I wouldn't read it minus 7x, I would read it negative 7x plus 1. But in an expression here, I would read it 3x squared minus 2x. Well, that 2x is still negative, just because I'm subtracting, okay? The next step in the skills review deals with just the distributive property. And in this case, it's a distributive property with variables and exponents. So remember, when we're multiplying, the exponents just get bigger. So x times 5x is 5x squared. X times x squared is x to the third. 4, I now am distributing a negative 2g. So when I distribute it in, it's going to be negative 2g to the third, because I'm adding another exponent. A negative times a negative is a positive. So it's plus 4g squared. Negative 2g times a positive 2 is a negative 4g. And I would do the same thing for number 7. Now the trick is, now I'm doing a negative 4ax. Well, negative 4ax times 10 is negative 40ax. Negative 4ax times a 3x. Now the x's are the same. So the x's become squared, but the a and the 4 don't. So I would just do negative 4 times 3, which is negative 12. Negative 12, oh, there's that minus sign again, negative 12 or minus 12. Ax squared. That means the a is not squared, but the x is, because I see two x's when I multiply them together. For the rest of these, again, I would distribute in. So I would distribute these, okay, into the parentheses. But because this minus 5 is outside the parentheses, I'm not going to combine it, or I'm not going to distribute. So I get 3x squared minus 4x minus 5x. Well, after I distribute, now I can combine these x terms to 3x squared minus 9x. Remember, when I'm distributing this, okay, it becomes another power, so that 3x squared is now a new term. So I can't combine it with the other x's. And I want to point out 14, because this is another problem that we often see in Algebra 2. And it's this first parenthesis, I distributed this 4n, which typically gives me no problem. So I have 12n to the third plus 4n squared minus 16n, because I'm just multiplying. Now the problem comes when I'm distributing in for this next piece. And this next piece, that is a minus n. That means that n is negative. So that negative sign comes with the n. So what is a negative n times a 3? A negative 3n. Typically, never the problem, that first term. Second piece, what's a negative n times a negative n? That's a positive n squared. So you have to watch when you're subtracting in that division, you carry through that negative sign. It's so key that you see negatives or minus signs as negatives. Because I can ask you what's a negative times a negative, but in this specific case, oftentimes students skip it. Okay? And then I would combine my like terms. So again, there's no n to the third. There are now 5n squareds and negative 19n's. So remember, after you distribute, then you would combine your like terms. The next piece is what we call foiling or multiplying binomials. Binomials means two things, two terms. So we did this when we were finding roots. So you're already pretty comfortable with this. I just want you to make sure that you see it in this fashion. So again, all it is a double distributive property. So I would get x squared plus 3x. I would then do plus 2x plus 6. I then can combine my like terms. Okay. For this one, again, you just gotta watch negatives. So it would be x squared minus 2x minus 6x plus 12, because now that's a minus 6 times a minus 2, or negative 6 times a negative 2, positive 12, x squared minus 8x plus 12. So these are all dealing with that double distributive property. The back page deals with special terms. So what you have to recognize is that x minus 6 squared is really x minus 6 times x minus 6. It's twice. Squared is always that thing times itself. So it's x minus 6 times x minus 6. So now I have my two terms that I can distribute. X squared minus 6x minus 6x plus 36. X squared minus 12x plus 36. I can do the same thing for 4. 4, again, is that 2x minus 1 times 2x minus 1. The reason why I can do this is I figured out a pattern. I'm seeing if you guys can figure out the pattern when I square something like this. So it's going to end up being 4x squared minus 2x minus 2x plus 1. So it's 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. And the other ones I want to point out, again, they're called special products, are the bottom ones here. So if I distribute this in, again, if I watch my negatives, x squared plus 4x minus 4x minus 16, what happens is when I combine these x's together, they cancel. Okay, so that's fine if things come out to be 0. It happens in here too, where when I distribute, again, I get 4x squared plus 2x minus 2x minus 1. Again, these middle terms are going to cancel. So it's okay to have things canceling out. If something equals 0, it just equals 0. So complete the rest of these practice problems. Again, this is a skills review. These are necessary skills for us to move on in our next unit. And then come in with any questions that you have, and we'll practice more next class.